It's astonishing to watch him sit across from an ally, the Israeli president. I mean, look at this. Do you think he does this with Xi? Does he do this with Putin? What do they think when he does it? And the only reason he's able to get away with things like that are because people like the New York Times cover for him. You know, in June, some who accompany him overseas express astonishment at his ability to keep up. Does this look like a guy who you're astonished at his ability to keep up? And they talk about him pushing Italy's prime minister. No, this looks like someone who is woefully behind. The frailty you are watching there, the nibbling of a child that happened yesterday. I just had to ask myself, does anyone in America think it is a good idea to give this guy 4 more years? I mean, this is what you're voting for. How is this good?
Conservatives like Kayleigh McEnany cannot comprehend why we don't cult worship our president and cult worship Biden. Most of the criticism that they will cite in any argument is criticism that originally came from us, that came from, the liberal media. Back in the 2020 election, we were faced with like an old person and another old person that just happened to be a fascist. And we were just like, ugh, like we held our nose and voted. We kind of make fun of people that voted for Biden in the primary. That's like a common joke of like, oh, you voted for Biden in the primary. That's a real dig.
I've suggested to some Republicans of late they have to be careful not to overstate the president's incapacity, because whenever we criticize him do it too much, he can turn up and do a reasonably okay job, and that's because expectations have become so low that the president just getting onto the stage and like making it to the lectern is seen as being a triumph. So I do think the Republicans have to be really careful not to overstate the case. And I've been saying this for a long time. And yet you see something like this yesterday and you think it's hard to overstate it. He looked at one point in that as he looked deep in prayer almost. I mean, just sort of mumbling into his lap with his hands together.
Or napping.
It's really terrible. And it's terrible, as you say, for America on the world stage, because other world leaders look at this and they do not see strength.
Because this guy just exudes strength. Am I right?
So, folks, here's what happens. I will call up Carrier, the president, because I have to do it myself. I know it's not...
Every election denier that I speak to says the same thing, basically, is that they went to these huge rallies that Trump would have, and there was a passionate turnout. There wasn't really rallies for Biden. And there's more than one reason for that. We don't really rally for Biden. We rally for, Black Lives Matter and things like that. It's not the same. And, they do have a point. And so they had a very funny outlook where they said, like, oh, how could he have won the election when we were the most passionate side? Be that as it may, the Democrats, they have a terrible messaging problem. They've gotten like a little bit better at it. They don't talk in ways that can get people excited and, have policies that people can like get psyched about, because they're just very middle of the road. They are center right at best. I would love to see, the things that they've done, like Build Back Better, actually come to fruition and have this sort of net positive effect on people's lives. One of the things you'll see after every failed Democratic election, you see this a lot, is the Democrats lost because they were too woke. They were too woke, right? You have a corporate Democrat, you have some corporate-backed Democrat having like a sort of a meh campaign where they're sort of always on the back foot, and they're not deciding what the agenda is that's going to be talked about, and then they lose. And what's the first to blame is wokeness. I hope Biden does not lose in the coming election. If he does, it will not be because of wokeness. It will be because of terrible messaging. It will be because of policy that failed to reach voters. One of the things that really upsets me with regards to, mobilizing younger voters is a lot of times Democrats behave in a very center-right fashion, and they think they need to be sort of middle of the road and not have a very strong message. What that winds up doing is, when you turn that to younger voters, it's hard to convince them that they're different from the Republicans. You're trying to say, like, go register to vote, show up, vote for, down ballot, because we don't want these people to win. And then the Democrats will do stuff that you're like, well, what's the difference really? And it disillusions a lot of younger voters, disillusions a lot of voters in general. So that is one of the things that frustrates me. I am looking forward to getting in the faces of a lot of Democrat candidates. There's certain Democrats I have in mind where I want to get in their face and scream at them. Do you know how hard it is for us to mobilize younger voters when you're being yourself and doing this and that and yeah. So I mean, I approve of yelling at Democrats and to their face, disrupting whatever events they have. If they're being awful,